Hello world, welcome to the 85th Climate Change Emergency Awareness Protest here in Getysburg, Pennsylvania, USA. This is number 85. Next week will be number 86, and that'll be on July 31st here at the square at the York Street crosswalk. Presently the CO2 level is 414.2. The equivalency, if you factor in methane, is I believe somewhere around 600 parts per million. The significance of 600 versus anything else is mankind and a static environment exists between 200 and 280 parts per million. So we're at 600 parts per million. And as I've said many times before, there is a 15 to 20 year or 10 to 20 year time lag between CO2 levels and temperatures catching up. So right now we're living in the year 2005 basically. And that's before Chinese manufacturing came on board and really started polluting the air, making the stuff for the middle class and white people of the world, of the Western world, such as Europe and the United States. So, with 600 parts per million and 280 is the uppermost limit of a static environment, we're in big trouble as far as, subjecting the atmosphere to all sorts of gyrations and then eventual massive heating. And the significance of massive heating is crop loss, and I'll talk about that a little later. Right now, the biggest news in the history of humanity, which the media is not covering, refuses to cover and will not cover because they're corporate owned, and for whatever reason the corporations feel that humans aren't a viable part of their environment. The Arctic melting and the heating is the biggest, Arctic Circle area is the biggest news in human history. And it's significant because it can cause massive feedback loops and is causing massive feedback loops throughout the world right now. Our weather here is just totally screwed up compared to what it used to be. There's a possibility of a blue ocean event in September, which means that there will be no sea ice, or basically little sea ice left in the Arctic Ocean, like the North Pole. So Santa Claus has to find another place to live, such as Greenland, if you're believing in that. So blue ocean event is a severe event because the albedo effect is lost in the North Pole area, and what happens with that is that everything heats up. So instead of the sun reflecting into the atmosphere off the ice and the snow, the sun gets absorbed into the ocean. So what happens with that is there's more sea ice loss. Greenland gets massively affected because now the oceans surrounding Greenland are massively heating up compared to staying at 32 degrees or less. Also, it allows for methane to escape, as well as CO2 levels around the perimeter of the Arctic Circle, and for example around the northern Russian area, the Laptev Sea and Karav Sea and all those. And it has massive amounts of methane, which is greenhouse gas, which is up to 160 times more potent in the first 2 years than is CO2. So it's an event that can lead to abrupt climate change and then ongoing climate change. It's the speed of everything that's happening that's going to kill us for sure. The plants and animals can't keep up with what's happening. You end up with massive feedback loops. So it's equivalent to trying to catch a ball rolling down the hill. Yeah, initially the first 5 feet, yeah, you can catch the ball, and the ball starts picking up speed, and the farther away it gets, the harder it is to catch. So that's an example of a feedback loop that you can't get it back once it's going. Or if you're driving a horse and buggy or a cart carrying massive amount of goods and the load starts shifting. Once the load starts shifting, you can sort of get to it real quick, but if you don't, the whole load starts to shift and affecting other parts of the load. So what I'm saying is that feedback loops are a horrendous side effect of climate change, and a lot of the IPCC does not factor that into their reports a lot of times, and I'll talk that in a little bit. The effect of climate change definitely is crop loss and habitat loss, and what that leads to is food insecurity and places you can't live anymore. It'll be uninhabitable, for example, in Southern Europe. Right now it's nice environment, sort of, kind of. Portugal, Spain, places like that. Southern USA, Mexico, all sorts of places. Australia, the middle of Australia, you won't be able to live there for sure. And maybe all of Australia. So we got these huge problems developing, and the media is not addressing it, and it's because they're corporate owned. 6 families or 6 corporations own most of the media in the United States. And what you're getting is a filtered effect and what they call an echo chamber, whereas they just spout things like coronavirus endlessly or other things, and they get on attack, and they're not covering the biggest event in human history. So I really suggest when you ever see a media person say, hey, why aren't you covering climate change, and you guys really suck at what you're doing, at this point it's the gloves are off, and you got to start being more aggressive as to what's happening around the world and our environment. If you question climate change, just look outside, and your world is nowhere near it was 30 years ago. It's undependable. You can't depend on what's going on. So the IPCC came up with their latest report, which is a whitewash of everything. They are touting themselves and patting themselves on the back how they covered CO2 in this and factored a more tight estimate as to where the temperatures are going. And what they said is the temperatures probably will end up at 2 degrees Celsius to 4 degrees Celsius by 2050 or something like that. And it's worthless. It's a piece of paper you might as well use as toilet paper, because what they did not factor in at all are the feedback loops. And without factoring in the feedback loops, your estimates are worthless. And things are going to spiral massively out of control. And what they're doing is they're sugarcoating things for some odd reason, and they're coming up with the lowest denominator of what politicians or scientists agree to, rather than going with what is going to happen. Any blind person could see what's happening, and any deaf person can hear what's happening. Right now, the estimate, even the estimate they gave though of 2 degrees to 4 degrees is not survivable Celsius. Right now we're experiencing all these things at what they say is a 1.1 degree increase. Can you imagine what a 2 degree increase is, let alone a 4 degree increase? It's unsurvivable. So I really suggest, again, that people get out in the street and protest and start arguing with your politicians when you see them, to get on board and start doing things, because not only your children's lives, which are surely in jeopardy, our lives right now are in jeopardy. As I said many times before, I don't see good things happening in the next 3 years with anything, politics or anything. And the shame of it all is the politicians are the ones that rule our environment and control what's going to happen to us. And if you look at them and see what they're doing or not doing, yeah, they're proposing things, but then they start watering things down as it goes along. Nothing's happening, and it's all negative for the most part, especially in the United States, and we're going to drag the rest of the world down with us. So I really suggest, again, you get in the politicians' faces whenever you see them. What's going to happen is that you're going to end up with massive amount of refugees and food insecurity. As I said, we take great pride in it being able to import our food from various places around the world. And right now, when things start breaking down, as we saw with coronavirus, things happen really, really fast. So the government's not going to be there for you. An example of their lack of being able to deal with crisis, and they are a reactive government, okay? All the governments are. They aren't proactive for the most part, and they don't look 20, 30 years into the future as to where things are going. So an example in the United States is the Black Lives Matter movement, where you have the police just beating on protesters who aren't involved in anything as far as riots and whatnot. They portray that all these protests are riotous events. Well, this is my 85th one of these, and I've been to 15 other types of protests, and I've never been in a riot in my life. So, most protests are peaceful protests, and they're not aggressive and whatnot. So you get some people in the left wing, and then you get infiltrators that cause riots, and that's what gets all the press. But in reality, protests are largely peaceful. They've had several Black Lives Matter protests here, and none of them have been riotous or anything like that. However, we have had other people with guns standing by on the other side of the issue. For some odd reason, there is another side of the issue as to respect for humanity, and they feel the need to bring guns in and try to intimidate people. But massive amounts of people cannot be intimidated by a few idiots carrying guns. So we need forward thinkers, for this Black Lives Matter issue. The response to the government now by Trump has been to send in troops, literally military troops into Portland, Oregon, and now Chicago. And what it is, it's an attempt at a fascist takeover as far as loss of democracy. And the Democrats in Congress and the Republicans in Congress are letting this happen. They're not cutting off funding for Homeland Security or anyone else or restricting it. They just passed another bill and give them unlimited, potentially climate change, your winner. So, you got a guy drive by in a truck, and he actually has his name of his company on the side of his truck, so he's yelling at me, and you know, I'm going to pass on his name to other people and say don't do business with these people. So you know, you lose business when you're an asshole. So he just lost 5, 10, 15 customers, and I know that business totally. So that's cool. Go ahead, be an idiot. You know, you need forward thinkers, people that think ahead in the government, and not these reactive old men that just do nothing. And the majority of them are white old men that control everything. You can't turn a blind eye to what's happening, and you can't be dogmatic in your politics as far as what is happening around the world. You know, these are knee-jerk reactions that are happening with both parties. People feel that Democrats are all about the people. In reality, the leaders of the Democratic Party, if you look how they're voting, are all about the corporations. And if you look at the leaders of the Republican Party, there's no doubt they're all about the corporations. So you are not being representative of what's happening, and you know, we will suffer greatly. The problem is that these people, these politicians, don't realize they are people too, and they have kids, and they're putting their kids in jeopardy and their own lives in jeopardy. But who cares? So whenever you're doing what you're doing right now, you know, obviously people aren't out here protesting. I'd say do the opposite of what's happening. You know, if you're sitting around, try doing protests. If you're looking out at your nice lawn and everything, stop mowing your grass, plant trees, dig it up, put in bushes, put in plants, put in other things, put in animals and that are animal-friendly trees and plants, and put in plants that are bee-friendly as well. Stop with the lawn mowing endlessly. It's an Olympic event in my neighborhood, and what we did is we dug up our lawn totally. So, you know, my mowing, I think I mowed twice this year on a strip of land that takes 45 seconds to mow. So what you need to do is probably dig up your lawn, because lawnmowers are extremely pollutive. And it also changes your thinking as to what you need to do about the environment. It gets you thinking in another direction rather than mowing your lawn endlessly and throwing down so-called fertilizers and insecticides in your lawn that just not only kills the bugs in your lawn, but also kills the birds and builds up toxicity in other animals. If you get a chance, telecommute to work when at all possible. Combine your drives. Instead of doing one drive to the bank and going home, and then one drive to the store and then going home, combine your drives. Do them all in one shot. Get cars that are energy efficient. You could buy local food in your area, wherever you are in Europe or United States. You know, buy food from your locality, your local farmer. Cut down on your meat consumption. That would be huge. Try turning your house into a passive solar gain house in the winter. You know, make sure you keep your curtains open. Build a solarium on the outside of the house so that you get heat, and then you can open your windows inside the house and gain heat in your house. And in the summer, plant trees that are deciduous trees, and in the winter they lose their leaves, but in the summer they have leaves, and you don't boil your house, and you can actually cool down your house and keep it from boiling over, and you don't need to use as much electricity or air conditioning. You know, shade trees are really important nowadays, and I see all these lawns in our neighborhood, and people don't have shade trees, and I just you got to look ahead and go, hey, which way are we going here? Is it getting cooler out, or is it getting warmer out? And obviously people aren't acknowledging that it is getting hotter out. So my advice to you and to everyone else is get out here and start protesting. Again, I'm here by myself. Tanya's going to show up in a minute or two, and there'll be just the two of us. You know, this is climate change protest number 85, and we're no closer. In fact, we're farther away from changing things than when I first did the first climate change protest. This is the 85th one. You got to know your politicians. You know, Trump's a nightmare for the environment and everything, and Biden, if you look, he goes on his record. Well, if you want to go on the record, then he was with Barack Obama the whole time, and that was Barack Obama. That's fracking, oil and gas fracking went exponential. And Biden says he won't take on the oil and fracking industry. So, you know, it's a whole thing. You know, even if he says he's going to do it in 15 years, that's kicking the can down the road. He won't be here in 15 years. So it's ludicrous. It's ludicrous for him to say he's going to do something and have something done. Hold on. Nothing but oil trucks going through. Hey, we're going to win. It's ludicrous for him to say, oh, we're going to do something in 15 years and do this or do that. He's not going to be here in 15 years. He'll be long since dead, and we'll have moved on, or we'll also become dead. So you got to know your politicians, and I'm not advising you to jump into the Green Party or jump out of your party or whatever, but there is a certain point where you got to recognize, either get severe and start changing your party from within, or get out and create another party or jump into that. If your party refuses, if your party refuses to change, then you need to get out of that party. No matter how hard you struggle, you're gonna gotta stop being so dogmatic. Man, this is Truck Alley now. You gotta quit being so dogmatic as far as having knee-jerk reactions that this party is this and this party is that. If you look at the reality of both parties, unless they're willing to change, they have become extreme corporatists and warmongers. So they've never met a war that they don't like, and it's very odd to watch the positions these people take, because if Trump pushes towards war, the Democrats push against it. If Trump says let's get out of the area, then they say they want to stay in the area, such as Afghanistan. So it's a very odd thing, and I don't recognize each party from when I was a kid. And believe it or not, I was once a Republican. Then they moved away from my positions. Then I was a Democrat. Then they moved away from my positions. And now I'm in the Green Party. And I assume that eventually they'll become corrupt and I'll have to go find another party altogether. So it's not that I'm changing. It's like the parties are shifting hard right. And if there aren't progressives inside those parties willing to push hard and stand their ground and refuse to budge on their issues, the parties are going to keep moving farther and farther to the right. And that is why you have troops in towns right now. You have military troops in towns, and no one is shifting, and they're allowing this to occur. So, look at both parties as to why they're not arguing against this issue as far as staging military personnel in towns. So I'll catch you next week. That'll be July 31st, and that'll be climate change protest number 86.